Morning, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Piers. Big show tonight because you'll be on when the vote is actually, well, we think it will be finished. Whether they announce it between 8 and 9, I'm not sure. But this has come very quickly, hasn't it?
Not really. I think it's been brewing for quite a while. I felt for a while that Partygate has been much more damaging to the British people for Boris than he realises. And I think that that's part of his problem has been that he's been stuck in Downing Street, thinking rules don't apply to him, going through life as Boris did before he was Prime Minister. And, of course, it's a bit different when you're running the show and when you're running the country. And I think that I've detected for a long time that a lot of people, particularly those who had a direct impact from the lockdown rules, who were not able to go and see dying loved ones. And I know 3 or 4 people who were not able to go and visit their loved ones as they died in hospital. I think it's the anger from those people which has been building and building and building, particularly when they see not just Boris Johnson fined by the police for breaking his own rules, but over 80 members of his own team. But I also said, and I said this from the start, that a Prime Minister can survive a scandal like Partygate, can survive hypocrisy and so on, but not when times are hard. They can only do it when times are prosperous and people feel their wallet and go, you know what, actually, I'm not in too bad shape. The thing I would take issue with what you just said is that you think that there's goodwill in the country from the Jubilee. I agree. But you also said, I think, something along the lines of, most people are feeling like things are pretty good right now. Honestly, they're not. There are millions of people in this country really feeling the pinch financially, and they want someone to blame. And so they're looking back at Boris Johnson and they're now thinking, you lied about Partygate, you're a total hypocrite about that, and we're all really suffering now financially, and they want someone to blame. And I think Boris Johnson is reaping the whirlwind of that double whammy.
And what about those who say the guy has had the most difficult Prime Minister's handle than any Prime Minister since Churchill, in the sense that he had to handle COVID for 2 years. He's had the war in Ukraine that's kicked off. There's the energy crisis, which has been brewing for probably a decade up until now. And he's had an awfully difficult card to have to fill out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's been one of the toughest times to ever be Prime Minister. And these tough times, as we saw with Churchill in World War II, people either, it's sort of cometh the hour, cometh the man, isn't it? Man or woman. And in this case, he's been found wanting. I can look at Boris Johnson's tenure and I can find things to praise him about. I think the COVID vaccine programme rollout was extraordinarily good for this country. And interestingly, Jesse Norman, one of the Tory MPs who's pulled the trigger on Boris today with a really stinging letter saying why he's lost confidence in him, calling him ugly and grotesque in relation to various policies. He's actually married to Kate Bingham, who is the woman that Boris brought in to run the COVID programme, and who was so brilliant in getting all the right vaccines. So that's real friendly fire from both sides in that scenario.
Oh, I think that's right. Because
but I think also, I was with my oldest son, who I disagree with a lot about stuff through the COVID pandemic. He's been quite big on Twitter with his views. Yes. But I said to him, I do think the way that Boris did not go back into lockdown after Christmas this year, for example, did show good leadership. I think he rightly calculated that now we have vaccines that work and most of the old and vulnerable people have been fully vaccinated. You've got to try and get on living with the virus. I agreed with that, and he was bold to do that. I also think he's shown good leadership over Ukraine, going to see Zelensky in Kyiv and all the rest of it. So there are lots of things where you could look at it and say Boris Johnson, under normal circumstances, there are quite a few ticks in the box. But I have said from the start of Partygate, this is the kind of scandal that brings down a Prime Minister. And when he got fined by the police and became the first Prime Minister in history to actually be fined by the police for breaking one of his own laws, I think that was for many people a tipping point, particularly when we saw the scale of the parting that was going on. I mean, I think, Mike, it all comes back to the Queen for me. What's the most devastating image for Boris Johnson in Partygate? It was the picture of the Queen at Prince Philip's funeral, a guy she'd been married to for 7 decades, her rock, the love of her life, being on her own, wearing a mask in a church with none of her family anywhere near her to console her, because she felt that she should abide by the rules Boris Johnson had set down. And the fact that we then discovered there was not one, but two late-night parties in Downing Street the night before the funeral, I think for a lot of people, they found that just contemptible.
Which he wasn't actually at, though, and that's the trouble, isn't it? Because he's now being blamed.
It's his house.
Well, it's his office, but there's thousands of people working in it. I, funnily enough, had a tweet sent to me that I'd put out last March of 2021, when I was calling for him to resign, not because of Partygate, because we didn't know about it then, but because of lots of other things. The failings of the Conservative Party to do anything about the illegal migrant problem, the failings of them to do anything about energy pricing, which is now rocketed through the roof, and also, finally, the green agenda. The problem for me is that the Tory party has now picked this moment, which is not the best moment to do so, to remove him. And we all know what will happen. He will probably win the vote, but he will probably be removed shortly thereafter, because that's what happens every single time this goes on. And I just think it's the wrong reason to get rid of him. And I disagree with you when you say that lots of people are unhappy with the Partygate thing. Some people are. An awful lot of people are not, and they don't think it's a good reason to remove the one guy who was possibly capable of getting us out of the European Union.
Yes, but what I think you're discovering, Mike, is that, as so often, I'm right about this and you've been found to be wrong.
Well, hang on. I was right last March, so, I can't be wrong now.
You should have stuck to your guns. I think Boris has been, as a Prime Minister, exactly like he's been the rest of his life and career, a complete shambles. And you get good Boris and bad Boris, and when times are good, I think it's fine to have good, Boris being a shambles. When times are really tough, it's much harder to be a shambolic Prime Minister. I once interviewed him for GQ, and I said to him, I've always said to people, Boris, I've known him 30 years, I like him personally, but I said, I've known you a long time, Boris. I've always said to people that lurking beneath the buffoon exterior lies a smart, calculating, ambitious mind. And he looked at me and smirked, and he went, well, Piers, that's pretty good of you. He said, but you must consider the possibility that lurking beneath the buffoon exterior lies a complete buffoon.
Yeah.
But in a way, there was also a slight truism to that, is he can't get rid of the buffoon act. And I think the Partygate played into that. I think Partygate cut a lot deeper than perhaps you want to accept. And I think the polling says that. Most people took a very bad view of it. And I think what's happened here is Tory MPs have gone back to their constituencies in half-term. There's been a mood of national celebration for the Queen, but they've also picked up on a mood of seething anger from people who feel that their Prime Minister did the preached and did the opposite, and in his case actually preached his own laws, which he then broke.
Yeah. Yes. No, listen, I don't doubt it. I think
you were Partygate, and I accept. I take it back and think we should move on. It's quite clear that the Tory MPs have picked up a very, very different vibe from their own constituents.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I'm going to put this one to you, Piers. Could it be possible that we're both actually right here? Because, in fact, we're coming to, once again to the same conclusion, but for different reasons, which is what happens a lot with you and I. What I think is going on as well is that there are an awful lot of people who think that they should be the people who vote down a Prime Minister, that the Tory party should not be the ones to remove a Prime Minister who was elected by a vast majority of people in this country with a massive majority. I mean, the Tories never cease to amaze me, and how they managed to completely trip themselves up and fall flat on their faces when there's no need for it.
Well, what they're trying to do, of course, is to achieve the complete opposite of that. This only happens when Tory MPs make a calculation, because they're ruthless, scheming, ambitious people, that the only way they can keep their job and their seat and remain in Parliament as an MP is to get rid of the leader that they think is heading for a massive beating in an election. I think you're going to see two by-elections on the same day, which is pretty unusual in itself, in 2 or 3 weeks. And they're going to lose badly, both of those, I believe. And I think that Boris Johnson has now gone from being seen as a winner by his party to a terminal loser. And they all fear they're going to lose their jobs if they don't get rid of him now and give a new Prime Minister, a new leader of the party, enough time to rebuild trust and confidence in the public. Because I think whatever your side of the argument, Mike, I think it's now inarguable that with the vast majority, and by that I mean 2/3 plus, of the British public, they've lost trust in Boris Johnson and they've lost confidence in him. There are still 30-odd%, I would think, who will steadfastly stand by him, whatever he does, because they love Boris Johnson. That's absolutely fine and proper, and that's their right in a democratic society. But all the polling suggests that the public support for Boris has disintegrated incredibly quickly, and it's all happened during Partygate. And so I looked at what happened at St Paul's Cathedral, and I couldn't remember ever seeing a British Prime Minister booed at a big royal event like that, and booed loudly and for a sustained period of time.
But you also know...
But they're not left-wing headbangers. You know, that audience...
Well, they're Londoners, probably, so they might be.
They're Middle England, and a lot of them will have been royalists, monarchists and Tories.
Yeah, so sure. But the other thing that you know very well, Piers, is that the enemies of Boris Johnson are the most vitriolic, most ghastly, most horrible people who will stop at nothing to get rid of him. And this is partly the problem inside the backbenchers of the Tory party. Tobias Ellwood and his like have always hated Boris and have always been waiting for their moment to get rid of him. Now it looks like they're going to get what they want.
But they only get what they want if the incumbent Prime Minister reaches a situation in personal popularity and polling where they can get what they want. And so I think it's chicken and the egg. If Boris was still polling strongly, none of this would matter. There wouldn't be a leadership contest. If these MPs thought that they were going to keep their jobs if Boris remains leader, they wouldn't be doing this. But they have all calculated, a large number of them, and we'll find out tonight exactly what that number is at the moment, that Boris Johnson's lost his winning touch. Now, the issue for him is, you know, tonight he could win it comfortably, in which case he'd probably fend off these enemies, as you put it, for another year, although even that rule may change. But more likely is not that he loses. I think that would be unprecedented and incredibly unlikely. But it's more likely he wins, but not by very much. And the scale of that Pyrrhic victory will be what does him in. Because if he wins, you know, I mean, Theresa May got 2/3 of the vote and her vote of no confidence, and she still was out within several months. So I do think it'll come down to scale of win rather than defeat tonight. But that scale, I think, is likely to be surprisingly low for somebody who only 2.5 years ago won a thumping majority.
Exactly right. We've only got 30 seconds left, Piers. Tonight at 8 o'clock, right here on talkTV, all the action with you. Who's going to be the next Prime Minister then?
Well, there are going to be lots of runners and riders. We know Jeremy Hunt's been on manoeuvres. We know Penny Morden's out today, notably not tweeting her support for the Prime Minister, but tweeting about some D-Day she's attending. That's quite literally on manoeuvres. I think you're going to see people like Nadine Zahawi, I think, will throw his hat in the ring. Tom Tugendhat, probably. I still think Rishi Sunak, for all the problems he's had recently, remains one of the better intellects in the cabinet and one of the best performers, certainly on a television screen. So I think he will probably be in the mix. Sajid Javid, perhaps, Priti Patel might fancy her chances. There's going to be a lot of runners and riders, but the way the system works, as you know, Mike, is that the Tory MPs between them will whittle that down to 2 people, and then there's the runoff with the Conservative membership about who they want to vote for, and that's more difficult to predict. I don't think there's any standout candidate. I would have said Rishi Sunak 6 months ago, but he's taken a bit of a battering with various issues involving non-dom status for his wife and so on, which will have chipped away at his support. I would still think he's got a very good chance, but we know from previous elections like this, it can be incredibly unpredictable. Nobody saw John Major coming when he became Tory leader. You know, these things can come out of nowhere. So I think it's going to be volatile and unpredictable, but I would say it is almost a nailed down certainty that by the time we get to Tory party conference in September, Boris Johnson is not the leader.
Piers Morgan, thank you very much indeed. Piers Morgan, uncensored, tonight on talkTV.